Well, I'm going to start this video by saying, all you guys that make YouTube videos on a regular basis, hats off to you, because this is just not something I'm good at. Mom always said I had a face for radio. So, my lowrider project, 4-pump, 8 battery, 63 Impala. I decided I wanted to run accumulators on the rear. Had a lot of issues with finding them, so I want to try to help out where I can and give back to the community that's given to me. I found these on eBay. Item number 316-130-252-827 from a seller called Pulley Winch, Puliwinch. They are a 4,700 pound rated 20 cubic inch accumulator. They were $250 shipped to the house. Come with a 3/4 16 UNF fitting on the rear. And these don't have the typical Schrader valve like I've seen on a lot of other accumulators. So we'll start there. I had to buy a kit. This has a screw in the top. That's an Allen. Down the side of that screw is a slit, kind of works like a banjo fitting. I bought the charging kit off of Amazon for $109. It came with the fill valve, a hose to connect to a 6,000 pound nitrogen bottle, which I do not have. Mine doesn't go up that high. Came with 3 different gauges in increments up to 6,000 PSI and 7 other adapters that, depending on what size Schrader valve you have on your accumulator, this hooks into that and you can charge several different sizes. My accumulator doesn't have that. It doesn't have the Schrader valve. This just screws right on top of it. All right, so before we start charging, you want to remove this plug out of the bottom. This is the oil side. This is where your hydraulic lines go. This is the 16 by or 3/4 by 16 UNF. So I got online and Googled 3/4 16 UNF fitting to 3/8 NPT. This is what I got. A company called Hydraulic Supply Company out of Sunrise, Florida. They were $6 a piece. Shipping was outrageous. End up being just shy of $34 for 2 of them to the door. The reason I decided to go with this is the fitting that screws into this. I'm running 3/8 lines, 3/8 slowdowns. These are the slowdowns that came in my kit. I'm going to use them to isolate the accumulators whenever I don't need them. I'm going to come through my dump off of that side with a 90, and these will hang down between the pumps. I'm still working on a bracket to brace them because these are a lot of weight. These are probably 6 to 8 pounds by themselves. All right, so we've got our adapter that goes on this side. We want to pull that plug out. What happened was, when I first tried filling these up, I pressurized the nitrogen side and it popped that plug out and kind of scared me a little bit. All right, so let me show you. I got my other accumulator set up in the bench on a vise. Basically just took a piece of 3/8 tubing, metal pipe that was 3/8 threads, put it in an adapter so my accumulator sits in the vise, so it's solid mounted. Line up that Allen wrench. Screw that down on there hand tight. As I said, the kit comes with a hose that hooks to a 6,000 PSI nitrogen tank. Mine is around 2,000 PSI. I just got my tank filled here in Central Illinois. It cost me $52 for an 80 cubic foot of nitrogen. All told, in this, with the money I had to spend at the Parker store to get to where I need to be, the accumulators, and my heat's going to kick on, my accumulators and all the valving and everything, I'm a little over $500 in 2 accumulators, and I already had the nitrogen tank and the compressor, or the regulator rather. So I have a hose that I had to have made at the Parker store with a 1/4 inch NPT running up to a 6,000 PSI coupler. I had to replace the Schrader valve one that was on this because it doesn't work with the hose that came with it. I can't use the hose, so I can't use the valve there. So I had to get a M14 boss fitting to 1/4 inch NPT. Then I got the 6,000 PSI couplers. Slides on there and snaps. All right, so as I open my regulator, off my nitrogen. You want to make sure it's turned down as much as you can. You don't want to over pressurize them all at once. And the reason why I wanted to feed off of my nitrogen regulator instead of bumping it straight off the tank is now I can control how much pressure goes into that accumulator here. Turning this knob, I'm hoping you guys can hear over the furnace. Turning this knob unloosens that screw that I showed you earlier with the hex. So as I'm doing this and opening it up, now I can allow that pressure from my regulator through the hose into the accumulator itself. So I slowly turn up the pressure on my regulator to slowly fill the diaphragm side of the accumulator. The videos that I've watched on YouTube say not to pressurize it full strength on a new one. Slowly increase the pressure so you don't rupture the diaphragm. So as I increase the pressure on my regulator, you can see the needle start to climb here. All right. So I'll just slowly, steadily increase that until I get my 300 to 350 PSI. And again, I'm going off of the guys at Lone Star Lowe's. They put out a really nice video on accumulators, on the size that you should run and the pressures you should run them at. Now, obviously it's going to be different for everyone depending on their weight and their setup and, you know, their personal preference. So I'm going to charge these to 350. I give myself some time. I can put them in as I'm driving. If I decide it's too stiff, I can loosen them up. I keep increasing my pressure on my regulator until I get roughly where I think I need to be. All right, let it stabilize for a little bit. That's roughly 350 pounds on the gauge here. All right, after I let it stabilize, I close my valve, and this is tightening that Allen head screw back up into the accumulator. All right, now I can bleed my pressure off that is inside the line. And inside my bottle if I don't shut it off. Make sure you shut your bottle off or it will drain the whole thing, all right? So I've got this one drained completely off. All the pressure is out of my line. With this setup, you have to make sure that you drain all of it with it still hooked up. Which, see, my pressure is down to 0. My gauge is shut off. This is shut off. So now I can tighten that back up. I can remove my fitting here. My accumulator is charged. It's not showing charged because I bled all the pressure off and the valve, the bolt that holds the valve closed is closed. If I make sure I'm off here and I open this back up, that's reading the pressure that's actually in my accumulator. So I'm just over 300 PSI in this accumulator right now. Tighten that back down, bleed it off, it's back down to 0. I'll set you back in the stand here. That accumulator is charged. There is an O-ring inside this fitting. It goes in the fill valve. I've had a couple of issues with it popping off. It just sits in there. Just make sure you put it back in there and you don't leave it on there. Put your caps back on. It's ready to go. Just trying to give back to the community that's given me so much information. Really close. I'm thinking in the next week or so I'll start putting the rear end in here. There's my rack. 4 pumps, 8 batteries. Still working on the stereo is what's keeping me from getting everything in. I don't want to climb over chrome and polish pumps and scratch anything, but as soon as I get the stereo figured out, I'll be posting more videos on this. And that's it, guys. I hope I helped somebody out. Thanks.